Deep sea divers, what are your horror stories? Saturation divers terrify me. They live in a dome for weeks so they don't have to decompress. One diver told a story about a colleague vanishing. He was right behind him, no signs of an accident on the safety line, no sounds or signals, just gone. The Byford Dolphin diving bell accident is pretty gruesome. When deep-sea divers were returning to the surface, they were in a decompression chamber at a very high pressure, and there was a catastrophic failure of the decompression room. That meant the air depressurized several atmospheres, which almost instantaneously killed a couple divers by literally exploding them from the pressure release. I can't think of a more gruesome tale. I am haunted by the story of a diver who was hired to remove and bring back bodies from a bridge that collapsed into semi-deep water with numerous cars on it. Some people made it out of their cars and some didn't. The worst thing that he saw was the bodies of children still stuck in the cars while the parents saved their own lives. The thought of going into murky water to bring up day-old corpses terrifies me. What's the most uncomfortable question you've ever been asked? I can maybe answer for my dad. When I was a young child, he helped me use a public restroom somewhere, and he went after helping me. I loudly asked him why he had such a large penis and why it had a beard. I am a pediatric sonographer, and I regularly have to scan kids in the late stages of cancer. Sometimes they ask questions like, "Am I going to die?" or "Is there a heaven?" and I do my best to reassure them without being too direct. Often the parents are right there at bedside and they don't have a good answer for their kids' questions either, so it falls on me to try to cheer them up without overstepping. I'd take a million stupid "Am I pregnant?" questions over dealing with those. I have military tattoos, so I often get asked by total strangers, "Did you ever kill anyone? Did you see any friends die? What is the worst thing you saw?" I understand people are curious, but seriously, I don't know you and it's not such a casual subject. What's the worst reason you hooked up with someone? I had a friend in college who shared a resemblance to me. We'd go to parties and introduce ourselves as brother and sister the whole night. Then we'd end each night making out furiously in front of everyone. She told me her therapist told her to have sex with me. I obliged. That seems like terrible therapy advice to me, but who am I to argue with a professional? My first long-term girlfriend cheated on me when she went off to college. We broke up. About 2 months later, she got hit by a bus and lost her leg. We got together a couple times after her recovery. Years later, I meet another girl with the same first name who had also lost her leg. What are the odds of someone else being able to say they slept with 2 girls with the same name with both missing a leg? So, I did the deed. What's the best response to being called fat? I've always enjoyed acting surprised. Wait, really? Why didn't anyone tell me? Same goes for when people tell you that smoking is unhealthy, as if you've never heard that before. If you seem bothered, they've won, so I reply with jokes. Less likely to get drafted into the military. If you're a guy, say that you're just pregnant, or insult them with a laugh. I can lose the weight, but you'll always be ugly. Pause long enough to create an awkward silence. Then say, "That's a weird thing to say to someone," and abruptly change the subject. They will feel uncomfortable. I have a vivid memory of seeing an obese person as a child. I pointed and yelled, "Mom, look how fat that lady is." My mom slapped me, which I think is the only time she's done that, and apologized so much to that girl. It's one of my earliest memories. What's an actual victimless crime? Putting coins in someone else's parking meter. Apparently that is a crime. It must be some corrupt reason, like wanting to give out more fines, or because stores want high turnover instead of one car staying too long. Owning 7 dildos in Texas. Owning 6 dildos is fine, but 7 is a crime. I think it's some religious thing about 7 being the number of God. If Satan had picked a higher number, then we could have more dongs. Dumpster diving. What should be illegal is destroying perfectly good food and consumer goods simply because they're out of season and people won't spend ridiculous amounts of money to buy them. Instead of using a huge discount or donating to shelters and people in need, giant corporations decide to destroy goods and make it illegal for people to look through their dumpsters and repurpose those items. What is a struggle men experience that women don't understand? I overheard my fiance's mother tell her that men have only 2 emotions, angry and horny, as if all men with emotions were just con men lying to get sex. It's difficult to balance being emotionally vulnerable, but masculine enough to be attractive. I knew a guy who had a big argument with his girlfriend, and she ended up throwing a pot of boiling water at him, leaving him with third-degree burns in his left shoulder area, so he went to the police. They said that he had probably done something to her to justify her doing that, and basically just laughed him off. In these types of situations, men are rarely taken seriously, and it's a huge problem. My grandpa tried to walk away from an argument with his girlfriend when she hit him on the head with an old-school glass ashtray. After he woke up, he called the cops, and they also put him in cuffs instead of his assailant. Western culture rarely holds women equally accountable, especially involving violent or sexual conduct. This only seems to be getting worse as more and more victimhood narratives replace responsibility. Autopsy doctors, what's the most interesting thing you've seen in a body? I had to watch an autopsy in medical school, and the pathologist started removing the organs of a female in her mid-30s. He said, "I bet she died of sepsis." He then removed a tampon from her vagina and simply said, "The ER doctor is definitely going to get sued." It taught me that every female in her reproductive years who is septic needs a pelvic exam. If the tampon had been removed, the ER doc could have treated her for sepsis and she could possibly have survived. I did a cadaver lab in college, and apparently pacemakers continue to go off long after the patient has died. The defibrillator wires have been cut so it can no longer shock the body, but the pacemaker will continue to beep. When I was a med student, our cadaver had a thumb-sized lump in his scrotum. I thought we'd discover a tumor. When I dissected and cut open the scrotum, there was a plastic object. It turned out to be a penile implant. Our professor had me dissect the entire implant out, and everyone else went to our table, and I had to show them the entire contraption. Reservoir, cylinders, and all. I was later called the penile implant guy. What is it that you invested thousands of hours and now is pointless? Asian parent piano lessons. It didn't make them happy. It didn't make me happy. I never got any good at it and gained no lasting skills for the 100 of hours per year spent practicing. I've heard the same thing from my various Asian friends. Most refuse to play or even own a piano, associating it with trauma and resentment. I understand that it's a good skill to encourage, but if the kid clearly isn't into it, then try exposing them to other activities. They have to want it. When I was a kid, music discs were king. I'd mow lawns in my neighborhood, earning $10 each, which was good for about a dozen albums a month. I sacrificed nutrition and my weekends for years of my life in school to build up a massive music collection. It was glorious, and the envy of all my musician friends. I thought for sure this would be the crown jewel of my adulthood and that I would pass them on to my kids someday. Then digital music came out and it was all pointless. Minecraft. From 2011 to around 2019, it was my go-to-depression game. Sometimes I'd play all day. Built a huge city with districts, tall buildings, a rail system, a zoo, and so on. Maybe I should have invested in a skill or something I could sell. What's the best response to "I love you" when you're not ready to say it back? I said "I love you" before my partner was ready to say it back. He said, "I appreciate you being honest and telling me how you feel. I'm not there yet, but I think I will be someday." We now live together, and I think he says it more than I do. I said it too soon. She responded with something resembling whale sounds. I drove home that night thinking I would never see her again. 6 years later, sometimes when one of us says "I love you," the other one will make whale sounds back. Your sentiment has been noted. I'll take it into consideration, thank you. I will reply within 3 to 4 business days. If it comes at an awkward or inappropriate time, like a first date, and you're not going to say it back, it probably doesn't matter what you say next. The best response depends on the situation and you have no time to think of it. You have about half a second to decide if this person means enough to you to risk screwing things up by not saying it back. If you really do care about them, it should hopefully come naturally. Do you want kids? Why or why not? No. I'll be telling them tonight when I get home. Mothers generally seem to have an instant bond. As a father, kids arrive as useless lumps, but as they grow they discover the world every day and you get to experience that with them. It's quite a ride, and the only real way to relive your youth. I've gone back and forth on the idea since I was younger. I'm almost 40, can barely take care of myself financially, and haven't been with anyone since my early 20s. It doesn't matter if I want them or not, it's just never going to happen. I love kids, but I absolutely could not afford them with my salary. I can barely afford my own life. It's a sad thing about the time we live in, but it frustrates me when people don't consider that and plan appropriately. Don't bring children into poverty.